Greetings of the day to all my dear students. I hope that you all are in good health. Today I want to share a small story with you all. One day a rich dad took his son on a trip to village. He wanted to show him how poor someone can be. They spent time on the farm of a poor family. Dad asked, "Did you see how poor they are? What did you learn?" The son said, "We have one dog, they have four. We have pool, they have rivers. We have lanterns at night, they have stars. We buy foods, they grow theirs. We have walls to protect us, they have friends. We have encyclopedias, they have Bible." Then they headed, "Thanks, Dad, for showing me how poor we are." So, the moral of the story is it's not about money that makes us rich, it's about simplicity of having God in our lives. So, always be thankful for whatever you have in life. Satisfaction is the greatest gift a person can have and can purchase for themselves. This is Shreya Jadhav welcoming you all to my e-learning channel. And today we are going to learn English grade 12 chapter 5 Indigo written by Louis Fisher. So, before starting with the reading and explanation of the chapter, let us know something about the author. Louis Fisher, born on 29th February 1896, died on 15th January 1970, was an American journalist. Among his works were a contribution to the ex-communist treatise The God That Failed in 1949, A Life of Mahatma Gandhi in 1950, basis for the Academy Award winning film Gandhi in the year 1982. Louis Fisher was an American journalist. In 1965, he won the National Book Award in History and Biography. Introduction for answer. Dear students, always remember whenever you are appearing for any exams, start your answers with introduction. This creates a good impact. So here it is. Prose name Indigo. Author's name Louis Fisher. Genre story. Summary. The narrator narrates Gandhiji's struggle at Champaran for the poor people. The peasants at Champaran were sharecroppers with British planters. So now let us move ahead for the summary of the chapter. Indigo is written by Louis Fisher, who narrates Gandhiji's struggle at Champaran for the poor people. The peasants at Champaran were sharecroppers with British planters. The peasants produced indigo on 15% of the land area, and according to an old agreement, they had to give it as rent to the landlords. It was around 1917 the Germans started developing synthetic indigo, and this mitigated the requirement of indigo for British planters. In order to release the peasants from the 15% old agreement, the Britisher demanded compensation from them. Most of the illiterate peasants agreed it to accept a few. During the period Gandhiji appeared in Champaran. He looked into the matter, stood by the side of the old peasants, and found a long battle of 1 year, managing to get justice for them. This made the peasants courageous and made them aware of their fundamental rights. Gandhi's work at Champaran didn't just confine to political or economic struggle. He also worked on social issues like arrangements for education, health, and hygiene for the families of poor peasants. He taught them the lessons of self reliance and self dependence. This was one of the first struggles that paved the way of for India's independence. This story describes Gandhiji's struggle for the poor peasants of Champaran. In those days, most of the land in the Champaran district was divided into large estates owned by the Englishmen and worked by the Indian tenants. The chief commercial crop was indigo. The landlords compelled to all tenants to plant 15% of their indigo and surrender the entire indigo harvest as rent. This was done by a long term contract. The British didn't need the indigo crop anymore when Germany had developed synthetic indigo. Just to release the peasants from that 15% of agreement, they demanded compensation. Some of the illiterate peasants agreed, but others refused. One of the sharecroppers named Rajkumar Shukla met Gandhiji in this regard and compelled him to visit Champaran because of the long term injustice of landlords. Then the two of them boarded a train for the city of Patna in Bihar. From there, Shukla led him to the house of the lawyer named Rajendra Prasad. Mahatma Gandhi's humble and simple attire made the servants mistook him as another poor peasant. He surveyed before taking any vital step in order to get those peasants justice. It was the time when British government punished those who in any condition gave shelter to national leaders or protesters. Gandhi's arrival and the nature of his mission spread like a wildfire. Many lawyers and peasant groups came in large numbers to support him. The lawyers accepted the fact that their charges were high, and for a poor peasant it will be irksome. Gandhi rebuked them for collecting big fees from sharecroppers. He stressed on counseling as this would give the peasants enough confidence to fight their fear. He managed to get justice for a year-long battle for the peasants. He also made arrangements for education, health, and hygiene for the families of the poor peasant. He gave them the lesson of self reliance. So, this is all about the story of the summary of the chapter Indigo. Now, let us start the reading and explanation of the same. About the author, Louis Fisher was born in Philadelphia and he served as a volunteer in British Army between 1918 and 1920. Fisher made a career as a journalist and wrote for the New York Times, the Saturday Review, and for European and Asian publications. He was also a member of the faculty at Princeton University. The following is an excerpt from his book, The Life of Mahatma Gandhi. This book has been reviewed as one of the best books written on Gandhi by Times Educational Supplement. When I first visited Gandhi in 1942 at his ashram in Sevagram in central India, he said, I will tell you how it happened that I decided to urge the departure of British. It was in 1917. He had gone to the December 1916 annual convention of the Indian National Congress Party in Lucknow. There were 2,301 delegates and many visitors. During the proceedings, Gandhi recounted, a peasant came up to me looking like any other peasant in India, poor and emaciated, and said, I am Rajkumar Shukla. I am from Champaran and I want you to come to my district. Gandhi had never heard of the place. It was in the foothills of towering Himalayas near the kingdom of Nepal. So, over here, the author is starting that it was for the first time in the year 1942 when he visited Gandhiji at his ashram in Sevagram in central India. And at that time, he is telling his story that how he decided, how he took a great decision, a great move for the departure of British in the year 1917. And it all started in 1916 when there was an annual convention of the Indian National Congress Party in Lucknow going on. At that time, there were 2,301 delegates and many other people. Gandhiji met all of them. There was a peasant who was like as common as other peasant in India. He said his name was Rajkumar Shukla and he wanted Gandhiji to come to Champaran. Gandhiji had never heard of that place. That place lied in the foothills of Himalayas near the kingdom of Nepal. Under an ancient agreement, the Champaran peasants were sharecroppers. Rajkumar Shukla was one of them. He was illiterate but resolute. He had come to the Congress session to complain about the injustice of the landlord system in Bihar. And somebody had probably said, speak to Gandhi. Gandhi told Shukla he had an appointment in Kanpur and was also committed to go to other parts of India. Shukla accompanied him everywhere. Then Gandhi returned to his ashram near Ahmedabad. Shukla followed him to the ashram. For a few weeks he never left Gandhi's side. Fix a date, he begged. Impressed by sharecroppers' tenacity and the story, Gandhi said, I have to be in Kolkata on such and such date. Come and meet me and take me from there. So now this Rajkumar Shukla, he was also a sharecropper of Champaran and they were suffering and somehow someone told that if you have any sort of problem like this, go and meet Gandhi. He will be helping you to solve. He took appointment from Kanpur and he always would go with him everywhere. Shukla would accompany him everywhere. And Gandhiji returned to his ashram near Ahmedabad and then Shukla told him that please fix a date. And Gandhiji was really impressed by the sharecroppers' tenacity and then he said that okay, he was having some sort of fixed date in Kolkata for some meeting. After the meeting was over, he could come and get him. Months passed. Shukla was sitting on his haunches at the appointed spot in Kolkata. When Gandhi arrived, he waited till Gandhiji was free. Then the two of them boarded a train for the city of Patna in Bihar. There Shukla led him to the house of a lawyer named Rajendra Prasad, who later became the president of Congress party and of India. Rajendra Prasad was out of town, but the servants knew Shukla as a poor yeoman who pestered their master to help the Indigo sharecroppers. So they let him to stay on grounds with his companion Gandhi, whom they took to be another peasant. But Gandhiji was not permitted to draw water from the well lest some drops from his bucket pollute the entire source. How did they know that he was not an untouchable? So eventually, now Gandhiji completed his work in Calcutta. Shukla was always over there, and after Gandhiji became free, they both boarded the train and they came to Patna, Bihar. Over there, they stopped at a place of Dr. Rajendra Prasad's home, and they stayed over there. Rajendra Prasad was not presently over there, but the servants let them to come in because they knew Shukla very well, who always used to come for help for the Indigo sharecroppers. The servants thought that Gandhiji was also some of those another peasant, and Gandhiji was not allowed to draw water from the bucket as well as from the well. And at that time he thought that how can we judge that this person is touchable or untouchable? Gandhi decided to go first to Muzaffarpur, which was en route to Champaran, to obtain more complete information about conditions that then Shukla was capable of imparting. He accordingly sent a telegram to Professor J.B. Kripalani of Arts College in Muzaffarpur, whom he had seen at Tagore Shantiniketan's school. The train arrived at midnight. 15th April 1917. Kripalani was waiting at the station with a large body of students. Gandhi stayed there for 2 days in the home of Professor Malkani, a teacher in government school. It was an extraordinary thing in those days. Gandhi commented, for a government professor to harbor a man like me. In small localities, the Indians were afraid to show the sympathy for advocate of home rule. So eventually, Gandhiji thought that first they were supposed to have the complete information about the whole incident. So they went up to Muzaffarpur. Over there, they first searched and found out. They stayed over there. They wrote a letter to one of the professor, and they stayed for 2 days in the home of Professor Malkani, who was a teacher in government school. It was an extraordinary feeling in those days for a government professor to become and to keep a person like him. In smaller localities, Indians were afraid to show sympathy to advocates. The news of Gandhi's advent and the nature of his mission spread quickly through Muzaffarpur and to Champaran. Sharecroppers from Champaran began arriving on foot by their convenience to see their champion. Muzaffarpur lawyers called on Gandhi to brief him. They frequently represented peasants' group in court. They told him about their cases and reported the size of their fees. Gandhi chided the lawyers for collecting big fees from the sharecroppers, he said. I have come to the conclusion that we should stop going to low courts. Taking such cases to the courts does little good. where the peasants are so crushed and fear stricken. Law courts are useless. The real relief for them is to be free from the fear. So eventually, now what happened? That when in Muzaffarpur everyone came to know that Gandhiji had come to solve the case of sharecroppers, indigo sharecroppers, people and advocates all over from Muzaffarpur as well as peasants from Champaran started walking on their legs and they came to meet Gandhiji. The lawyers briefed them about the whole case which they were fighting for the peasants, and they told that how much they charge. At that time Gandhiji was a bit to be said no unhappy with whatever happened, because these poor peasants didn't had money and the lawyers charged a lot, and this didn't made any good to them. The peasants were fear stricken and the laws of the courts were useless. The real relief for them was to be free from the fear. And most arable land in Champaran district was divided into large estates owned by the Englishmen and worked by the Indian tenants. The chief commercial crop was indigo. The landlords compelled all tenants to plant 3/20 or 15% of their holdings with indigo and surrender the entire indigo harvest as rent. This was done by a long term contract. So now it was that a major portion in Champaran was being held, was under the control and was owned by the Englishmen, and the Indian tenants would work over there. The chief commercial crop was indigo, which was being planted. The landlords were compelled that all the tenants are supposed to plant 15% of their total land holding with indigo, and the remaining land they were supposed to surrender to the entire field as a rent. And this was continuously going for a very long time duration. Presently the landlords learned that Germany had developed synthetic indigo. They thereupon obtained agreement from the sharecroppers to pay them compensation for being released from the 15% arrangement. The sharecropping arrangement was irksome to the peasants and many signed willingly. Those who resisted engaged lawyers, the landlords hired thugs. Meanwhile, the information about the synthetic indigo reached the illiterate peasants who had signed, and they wanted their money back. So eventually, the sharecroppers decided that now it was high time for them. They were not aware about what actually was happening with them. So now they wanted their money back, as Germany had started developing the synthetic indigo. And this long term agreement, which was between the peasants and the Britishers wanted them to complete it so that they could owe the whole land. The sharecropping arrangement was very irksome to the peasants, and many of the peasants have signed. Now, those who have signed it, they also came back when they came to know about the news of the synthetic indigo. Those illiterate peasants also came and they wanted their money back. At this point, Gandhi arrived in Champaran. He began by trying to get the facts. First, he visited the secretary of British Landlords Association. The secretary told him that they could give no information to an outsider. Gandhi answered that he was no outsider. Next, Gandhi called on the British official commissioner of the Trihat division in which the Champaran district lay. The commissioner, Gandhi reports, proceeded to bully me and advised me forthwith to leave Triad. So eventually, now what happened? He went when he arrived at Champaran. All of the peasants came to know that Gandhiji would be that one person who would help them to get out on and to fetch them money back. And first, they visited the secretary of the British Landlord Association. The secretary told that they were unable to give any information to an outsider. At that time, Gandhi told that he was not an outsider. Next, Gandhiji went on to call the British official commissioner in Trihar division, in which the Champaran district came. The commissioner bullied him and advised him to leave the place. Gandhi did not leave. Instead, he proceeded to Motihari, the capital of Champaran. Several lawyers accompanied him. At the railway station, a vast multitude greeted Gandhi. He went to a house and, using it as headquarters, continued his investigations. A report came in that a peasant had been maltreated in the nearby village. Gandhi decided to go and see. The next morning. He started to break out on the back of an elephant. He had proceeded far when the police superintendent messenger overtook him and ordered him to return to town. So eventually, when the British official commissioner of Trihar division told him that he should leave the Trihar, at that time Gandhiji did not live. He proceeded, he went further to Motihari, the capital of Champaran, and he met several lawyers over there. And at the railway station, there were many people who greeted Gandhi. He went to a house which he used as headquarters and continued his investigation. At that time, he came to know that one of the peasants was maltreated in the nearby village. So Gandhiji decided that he would go and see him. When next morning he started his journey to go and see that peasant, he started out on the back of an elephant. When he proceeded, the police superintendent's messenger came and he told that he was supposed to return back to his town. He was not supposed to stay over there in Champaran. So, this is all what we are keeping till today. In the next lecture, we shall continue with the chapter. I hope that every one of you have understood it. Thank you for watching and have a nice day. If you still find any doubt or queries, you can comment down in the comment section below. Have a great day, everyone.